Sharing the road with an 80,000-pound commercial vehicle at highway speeds, you rely on a complex web of safety regulations to protect you. But before 2020, that safety net had a terrifying hole in it. The industry was plagued by what was known as the phantom driver loophole. If a commercial driver failed a random Department of Transportation drug test, they could simply quit their job before the consequences hit. When they applied to a new trucking company, often in a different state, they would deliberately leave that short, tainted employment stint off their application. Because background checks relied almost entirely on a driver's self-reported employment history, that failed drug test practically vanished. Motor carriers, acting in perfectly good faith, frequently authorized drivers with active, unresolved substance abuse problems to operate 80,000-pound vehicles on public roads. Congress intervened in 2012 by mandating a technological solution, which officially launched in early 2020 as the FMCSA Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. Instead of carriers chasing down paper records from previous employers, every single drug and alcohol violation is now funneled into one secure, centralized national database. When a violation is recorded, it permanently attaches to the driver's commercial credential. It doesn't matter if they cross state lines, change employers, or leave the industry for a few years. This reporting architecture ensures a driver's testing history follows their CDL number from one employer to the next, regardless of what they choose to disclose on an application. This system relies on a rigid set of digital tripwires, starting before a driver is even hired. Employers must run a full query on any new applicant, and because this involves highly sensitive medical data, the driver has to log in and explicitly grant electronic consent before the hiring process can move forward. But the monitoring doesn't stop once a driver gets the job. Employers are required to run an annual query on every single active driver in their fleet on a rolling 365-day basis. This acts as a continuous background ping against the federal database. If that annual ping returns a status of records found, it means a violation has hit the database. The moment that status appears, an unforgiving 24-hour compliance clock starts ticking. The employer has exactly 24 hours to upgrade to a full, detailed query to see exactly what the violation is. If they miss that window, or if the driver refuses to consent to the full query, the driver must be immediately pulled off the road and removed from all safety-sensitive functions. This binary system transforms DOT background checks into high-stakes operational mandates, where a single missed deadline or late report can immediately ground a driver and trigger heavy fines. So, what happens when a driver actually fails a test? The moment an employer or a medical review officer verifies a positive result or a test refusal, they are mandated to input that data into the clearinghouse. Instantly, the driver's federal profile flips to a red prohibited status. By federal law, no motor carrier in the country can allow them to operate a commercial vehicle. Looking at this visual representation of the current database, we can see the massive compliance bottleneck this has created. As of late 2025, over 180,000 commercial drivers are sitting in an actively prohibited status, stripped of their livelihood. And this pie chart shows exactly what's driving those numbers. Marijuana metabolites consistently account for roughly 60% of all identified substances in these positive tests.
Because marijuana remains a Schedule I controlled substance federally, state-level legalization offers no protection here. A positive test triggers an absolute barrier to employment. To clear that prohibited status, a driver must surrender to a grueling clinical gauntlet known as the Return to Duty, or RTD, process. It starts with a comprehensive evaluation by a DOT-qualified substance abuse professional. This clinical expert dictates a strict, non-negotiable treatment or education plan that the driver must complete out of their own pocket. Once cleared by the counselor, the driver faces the ultimate hurdle, the Return to Duty drug test. Because this driver has a known history of violations, this specific test must be conducted under direct physical observation by a collection site professional to eliminate any possibility of using synthetic urine to cheat the results. Even after passing and returning to the road, the driver remains under a regulatory shadow. The counselor prescribes a mandatory plan of unannounced, directly observed follow-up testing that can last for up to 60 months. Completing the process doesn't erase the mistake. The violation acts as a permanent ledger, remaining visible on the driver's clearinghouse record for a minimum of 5 years to ensure long-term behavioral accountability. In its early years, the clearinghouse had a glaring blind spot. A driver could be listed as prohibited in the federal employment database, but they still physically possessed a valid-looking commercial driver's license in their wallet. If that prohibited driver went rogue, operating an illicit truck, a local police officer running their physical CDL during a routine traffic stop would see a clean record in their state dispatch system. The driver would be handed back their license and allowed to drive away. To aggressively close this gap, the FMCSA rolled out the Clearinghouse 2 rule in late 2024. Now, the federal database pushes real-time violation notifications directly to state driver licensing agencies. When a state receives that notification, a 60-day legal clock starts. By the end of those 60 days, the state is mandated to physically strip the commercial driving privileges from the individual, downgrading them to a standard personal driver's license. This escalation transitions the penalty from a hidden employment ban in a federal computer into the physical destruction of the credential.